agenda item number 1, briefing by the Secretary for Development on the Chief Executive's 2023 Policy Address. Let's invite government officials to enter. For members who would like to put questions, please press the Request to Speak button. Welcome government officials for attending today's meeting. We have a number of government officials attending the meeting today, so I have distributed the attendance list to members. I will not go into detail. The administration will make a presentation with the aid of PowerPoint slides. I would like to invite the Secretary for Development to give us a few words. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman and members. Before the Permanent Secretary make a presentation, I would like to make a few points. We adopt enhancement of quality, quantity, efficiency, and effectiveness as the framework of our work this year. In terms of measures, we have promulgated the 10-year supply forecast of available land. For enhancing effectiveness and efficiency, we have streamlined a number of statutory procedures for land developments. After passage of the amendment bill, we will continue to improve the administrative measures for statutory procedures for land development. We will have short-term measures that will be mentioned and presented by the Permanent Secretary. We would like to enhance efficiency in terms of development of old districts, and we will review the buildings ordinance to ensure safety of buildings. For land creation and development, we have a number of projects. There are 2 major projects, including Kawicho Artificial Islands with reclamation of 1,000 hectares of land. Upon public engagement exercise this year, we will start the environmental impact assessment. As for the other engine, that is the Northern Metropolis, we have published the action agenda for that yesterday. So these are the 4 major areas that we will take forward this year. I would like to invite the Permanent Secretary to make a presentation. Thank you. Permanent Secretary, please. Thank you, Chairman. Let me first talk about the supply of developable land. From now until 2024, we need about 6,000 hectares of land. We have already identified 7,000 hectares of land that will meet the needs. And we have 1,000 hectares of land for us to build a land reserve. Last week, we promulgated the 10-year forecast of developable land supply. That is about 3,370 hectares. That is 90 hectares higher than the 10-year projection published in the last year. Half of the land supply come from our 2 large-scale projects, including the Northern Metropolis and the Kawicho Artificial Islands. This PowerPoint shows the 10-year forecast of developable land supply of 3,300 odd hectares in the form of charts. In the first 5 years, the supply of spade-ready land will come from Kutong North, Hongshui-Q, Yuen Long South, Newtown. After that, Sentin Technopole will be supplying another batch of land, and then we will have land from Kawicho Artificial Islands and Longkou Tan or Longkou Beach and Tseung Kwan O and New Territories North Newtown. As mentioned by the Secretary, we published the action agenda of the Northern Metropolis yesterday. It provides details of the development blueprint of the Northern Metropolis, including the positioning of the 4 major zones and the timetable, as well as our conservation plan. There are specific chapters on development and needs of different industries, because this is one of the major direction that we have, that is industry-led approach. If you listen to the press conference yesterday, then you will know that we have 4 major zones in the Northern Metropolis from the west to the east. They are in Hongshui-Q, Hachun, Yunlong South, connecting to Modern Service Corporation Zone in Qianhai. This is the high-end professional services and logistics hub. Because it's next to Shanghai, we want to turn this hub in Hongshui-Q into a hub that provides insurance, risk assessment, and wealth management. Because it's next to Shenzhen Bay, here we would like to develop modern logistics. Next to this hub, we have INT zone. As you all know, Shanghai Technopole and the Hong Kong Shenzhen INT Park will be inside this zone. The positioning is very clear. We will develop innovation and technology in this area. Further to the east, this is the Boundary Commerce and Industry Zone. It covers 3 boundary control points, BCP, including Luowu, Mankamto, and Heung Yun Wai. Because some of the BCPs are frequently used by residents of Hong Kong and Shenzhen, so we will include industries including medical, consumption, etc. Because this is a very large piece of land, we can develop industries that need a large piece of land, including MIC industry as well as some green industry, food technology, etc. Further to the east, we have a blue and green recreation, tourism, and conservation zone that covers abundant, rich natural and cultural resources, including Robin's Nest, Yan Chao Tong, and Chateau Coq. The theme of the Northern Metropolis development is infrastructure-led. As mentioned in the policy address, there will be 2 cross-boundary railways connecting to Qianhai and Hongshui-Q. We have a Hong Kong-Shenzhen Western Rail Link. Another cross-boundary railway will be the Northern Link Spur Line, connecting Lok Mau Chau Loop and New Huanggang Port in Shenzhen. For local railways, we have Northern Link Main Line. As mentioned in the policy address, we will extend this Northern Line or Northern Link towards the east, connecting Kutong North, Mankamto, Luowu South, Honglonghang towards Pingche in the east. And we have another rail link that is the Northeast Rail Link in New Territories, going from Heung Yun Wai to Pingche, Taku Ling, all the way to Queens Hill, and then the East Rail Line, Fanling Station. We have another major road shown in the yellow dotted line, that is the Northern Metropolis Highway, going from Tin Shui Wai to different districts, all the way to the New Territories North New Town. We have to balance development and conservation. That is why we have a number of conservation projects, including the Shampoushu Wetland Conservation Park next to Shanghai Technopole. And we also focus on rural-urban integration. As mentioned by the Secretary in the press conference yesterday, we will adopt a diversified land disposal arrangement And we will also extend the enhanced conventional new town approach to all new development areas. For in situ land exchange arrangement, we will improve it to allow market participation in the development of new development areas. Looking ahead, we have 3 milestones. By 2024, for New Territories North, New Town, and Lau Fau Shan, we hope that we can complete the planning and start public consultation for those projects. As for land resumption for Kwun Tong North and Fan Lin North new development area, in 2018 we have already started the land resumption exercise. For the land resumption exercise for other projects, we hope that by 2027 we can commence those land resumption exercise. By 2032, we hope to form 40% of the new development land and complete 40% of the new flats. Another new engine for development is the Kau Wai Chau Artificial Islands. I'm sure that you're familiar with it. We reported to you the result of the public engagement exercise. This year, we will start the environmental impact assessment process. There are some comments or people who are worried about the financial stress of these projects caused to the government. So there will be a committee on the financing of major development projects to be led by the financial arrangements for the development of Northern Metropolis and Kau Wai Chau Artificial Islands. Now, I would like to talk about review of land use. Including the one in Hong Ham Station in Kowloon, we have engaged the MTRCL to conduct a preliminary study and review of the Hong Ham Station. The area review will be the blue area on the slide. The area not covered is the Hong Kong Coliseum. Through this study, we want to achieve a number of targets. First, we want to revitalize the area and release commercial and residential floor area. Second, as you can see that we have a large piece of waterfront area. We will review the land use and hopefully we can bring about some commercial, retail, and F&B facilities to the area to make it more vibrant and meet the needs of tourists. Another target is that we want to enhance the connectivity of pedestrians, including the pedestrian connectivity connecting the Cross Harbour Tunnel and the Hong Ham. We will take reference from the study conducted by the Polytechnic University. We want to enhance pedestrian connectivity between Hong Ham and the waterfront area as well. For passenger facilities in the Hong Kong station, because of the implementation of the e-toll, some road space have been made available. This allows us to improve the waiting area of the bus stops near the Cross Harbour Tunnel.
We hope that in the next year, the MTRCL can submit the preliminary proposal. Another study that we are going to do is in the X-Lama quarry site. We have 20 hectares of land. We hope to make good use of the site to develop accommodation facilities. We do understand that the transport network is not as developed in the area, so we may need to have accommodation facilities with low traffic demand, for example, elderly residential units or some residential buildings for talents. The natural environment is quite beautiful. It also has a shoreline and a water body. I believe we can make use of natural resources to develop recreational facilities. We hope that the study can be completed next year. In the policy address, we also mentioned some green belts. We have approximately 16,000 hectares of green belt, and some have already been included in development proposals. For the remaining ones, those may be located on slopes or in collection areas, or there may be vegetation. So we do not plan on using more green belt zones for developments, but we believe green belt zones can bring about other developmental opportunities. We have approximately 300 hectares of land in South Lantau. You can see here it's scattered in 4 locations. The natural environment is very great. We hope to make use of the green belt zones here to develop recreational facilities for families to visit during the weekend. We hope that in the first half of next year, we'll have some preliminary proposals for public consultation. Let's now talk about streamlining development procedures. Thanks to the support of society, we have passed the bill in July, and it came into effect in September of this year. We can now compress the timeline for procedures. In this year, we will introduce another bill into the LegCo. We want to streamline the procedures for the extension of land leases. We will also review administrative procedures. It is an ongoing process. Some procedures have already been streamlined, and there are some that are to be implemented as shown here. Let's now talk about aged buildings. Of course, we want to redevelop some of the aged buildings. That is the strategy we adopt. Approximately this time last year, the Development Bureau has made certain recommendations that for some private projects, we should adopt a more target-oriented approach for the lowering of the compulsory sale application thresholds, lowering it from 80% to 70 or 60%. We have consulted many different parties, including the LegCo members. We have several major comments. Apart from considering the building age, we should also consider, with the lowering of the threshold, that there should be a more clearer policy direction so that we can direct market forces to the buildings in desperate need for redevelopment. We think that is a good suggestion, so we have considered refining our proposal, and our refined proposal is that we can use some objective indicators. For example, how many old buildings are there in the district, and how many of them are age 80 years or above, or how many buildings are issued with mandatory building inspection scheme and BIS notices. So those districts include Cheung Sha Wan, Shim Shui Po, Kowloon City, To Kwa Wan, Wong Kok, Sai Ying Pun, Shang Wan, Chun Wan, Wan Chai, and Yau Ma Tei. Having identified these districts, coupled with the age of buildings, we have now proposed the rightmost column of application thresholds. Now, the policy consideration is that for districts that require redevelopment, if the building age is relatively high, it will have a lower threshold. We want to have more compulsory sales in the districts that would require redevelopment. For buildings that are aged less than 50 years, we will maintain the current compulsory sale application threshold that is 90%. If it is between 50 years to 60 years of age, if it is not located in old districts with pressing need for redevelopment, we will maintain the current threshold that is 80%. If it is located in the 7 districts I mentioned, the threshold will be lowered to 70%. If the buildings are aged 60 to 70 years old, if it is located in old districts with pressing need for redevelopment, the threshold will be 70% or 65%. If the buildings are age 70 years or above, we, regardless of the location, will make the threshold 65%. There's one more point I wish to raise. For last year's proposal, the lowest threshold was 60%. Having heard the feedback given, it was said that the threshold is a little low because for some mainland cities or Singapore, the lowest threshold is 65%. That's why we have adopted this proposal and we have made the lowest threshold 65%. We hope that in this year, we will introduce the bill into the LegCo. If members have any comments, please give them during the discussion of such bill. Now, for the very last box on this slide, we want to talk about large-scale redevelopment in old districts. We will need more space, but there is not much space for maneuvering in old districts. So we can see that Kaoyichou has brought about such opportunity. We will commence a study this year to see if we can deploy part of the land of Kaoyichou, the space outside Kaoyichou CBD, to facilitate implementation of urban redevelopment projects by the Urban Renewal Authority, URA, or the private sector. Now, with 8 buildings, we are concerned about building safety, and it was mentioned in the policy address that we will review the buildings ordinance. There are many things that we wish to review because the ordinance has not been updated in a while. The major areas are: 1, to strengthen enforcement power of the buildings department. For example, if there are unauthorized building works, UBWs, we will have harsher penalties. If it is an unauthorized basement or some clothes hangers outside external wall buildings, there is, of course, a difference in degree. If they did not comply with the removal order, the penalties should reflect the seriousness of the offense. We will also streamline prosecution procedures and threshold for contraventions such as those who have not complied with mandatory building inspection notices. There is not much collection of evidence required. Will we be able to deal with those with fixed penalties? That's what we'll consider. We will also review the registration system and the disciplinary system for contractors. When we impose disciplinary action, it is often only after an incident has happened. If we can do it sooner, we want to try to do that. Now, the points at the bottom are in response to the spalling of concrete cases. We believe a systematic review is in order in relation to the mandatory building inspection scheme and BIS, so that owners, corporations, and owners can have inspections and repairs carried out as soon as possible. We hope that some policy recommendations or proposals will be raised in the first quarter of next year. In relation to the aging population, with the leadership of the Deputy Financial Secretary, the Development Bureau will amend the building design manual of the buildings department to incorporate the concepts of universal design and accessibility. For example, for the wheelchaired elderly persons, they can conveniently get into their toilets. We want to incorporate these concepts into the manual, and we'll see how we can implement them, whether it's in floor area concession or whether we should make it mandatory in the legislation. Lastly, on extreme weather, we will have to implement flood prevention measures. The Drainage Services Department is conducting a study on flood management strategy. The study will be completed next year. We also will deploy $8 billion in stormwater drainage improvement works. We'll ask for funding in 2024 and 25. 7 projects are involved. The projects are going to be carried out in areas that face serious flooding, including Wong Tai Sin and Hong Kong Island East. We will also conduct systematic investigations and studies on larger scale landslides triggered by extreme rainstorms. We will also review and strengthen those slopes with larger impacts to the livelihood of the public. That's it for my presentation. Thank you, Chair. We now have 13 members who have requested to speak, including myself. I'll first read out the order. Mr. Kenneth Lau, Dr. Chow Man Kong, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok Lau, Mr. Lau Kok Fan, Ms. Lam So Wai, Ms. Chen Yut Ming, Mr. Chen Hock Foon, Ms. Doreen Kong, Mr. Andrew Lam, Mr. Louis Lung, Mr. Holden Chow, Mr. Edward Leung, and myself. So 4 minutes per person. Please allow more time for the representatives of the administration to speak. First, Mr. Kenneth Lau. Chair, I want to ask something that rural residents are very concerned. Now, it is said that by the Secretary for Development in her blog that they can ask for land lease recognitions for 90% and 10% of the land can be used for development. Is that just an extension of the land resumption ordinance? Now, with the newly developed land, it was supposed to be used for the construction of GRC facilities or public housing. Of course, we'll support that. But now you are using that power to resume land for private development. Where should the line be drawn? Are we no longer protecting property ownership? That's what we have to think about. Now, most of the land will be in new territories. They may not be developed soon. It will something like this happen, that the land will fall into the hands of private developers and the government and the private developers are exploiting the interests of minority owners. This is going to affect investor confidence as well. I also want to ask about Tin Shui Wai, Yuen Long South, and neighboring areas will be developed into a advanced logistics hub. Tuen Mun is not included, and I'm disappointed about that. it was said that 200 hectares of land will be reclaimed and for brownfield operations and green industries. But it was not mentioned in the Northern Metropolis Action Agenda. Is it the case that in future, when funding is sought for reclamation, that you'll have a proposal for us? Thank you.
Secretary, please. Thank you, Chairman. 2 questions from Mr. Lau. The first question relates to when the land resumption or institute land exchange will happen. We're talking about the land in the new development areas in Northern Metropolis. In other words, the government will take the lead in invoking the land resumption ordinance to resume any land for consolidated land formation before land tendering or sale will take place. Our proposal is to answer the demand from a lot of landowners. Before we start land resumption, if the landowners can act in accordance with the planning intention of the government, they can apply for development of land by themselves. Perhaps some landowners only own 90% of that particular land parcel. Then we will resume the remaining 10% of the land and hand it over to the landowner for development. It will not cause any difference for the landowner owning 10% of that land because they were expecting the government to resume land anyway. We are not expanding our power to resume land, but we are allowing the landowner to develop the piece of land. We think that the 90% threshold is high enough. Your second question on Long Ku Beach. As Northern Metropolis fall within North District and Yuen Long District, so it does not cover Tuen Mun District. There are a number of development projects in Tuen Mun that are coming, including the Long Ku Tan mentioned by Mr. Lau. With the support of the panel on development in November this year, we will submit the funding proposal to PWSC for consideration. So we are taking forward the project. Thank you. Next, Dr. Chow Man Kong. Thank you, Chairman. I read the parts on land and housing in the policy address, and I listened to the press conference on the Northern Metropolis Action Agenda. I think that you are taking a very pragmatic approach because Northern Metropolis is an important driver for Hong Kong's development, and I would like to commend the Development Bureau. I went to Sandy Ridge Public Columbarium, or where it's supposed to be. I reflected several problems to the Secretary for Development previously, and this retrieval of project of constructing public columbarium in Sandy Bridge, I think that this is the right move. I see your layout with urban redevelopment, artificial islands in Northern Metropolis. We only have 600 billion in our reserve. And I also see a balanced participation of the public and private sector. Looking at the mainland, since opening up 40 years ago, they are demolishing a number of buildings. They have some rehousing arrangement and some kind of tickets with values. Will you consider issuing such tickets to residents that need rehousing? I would also like to talk about Northern Metropolis University Town. There are some colleagues or people who work in the university that are very excited about this initiative. I would like to know about the area and the size of this university town and what kind of institutions will take root there. Some members of the public who work in the university told us that they are working in the area or urban area. If the campus is handed over to the government and the government relocates it to the Northern Metropolis, then it will be very difficult for them. There are some similar examples in the mainland. Sometimes campuses of universities were relocated to Hong An district, etc. What is the government's plan in this area? Thank you. Secretary, please. First question on financing. We have 2 large-scale projects together with other minor and medium-scale projects. For large-scale projects and its financing, as mentioned in the policy address, the Financial Secretary will establish or lead the Committee on the Financing of Major Development Projects to come up with some financing proposals for the large-scale projects and to look at how many % of the project will be financed by the government. We are still taking forward the Northern Metropolis, including the Tongshui-Q, Gudong North. There are works going on there. So we will not be waiting for the comprehensive report put up by this committee before we take forward any other projects. But for the long-term projects for Northern Metropolis, I believe that this committee will give us some ideas. As for the Northern Metropolis University Town, according to our action agenda, we will reserve about 60 hectares of land for that. They are distributed in Hongshui-Q, Hachun, and its vicinity. There will be 5 hectares of land reserved for self-financing post-secondary institutes. For the remaining 55 hectares, they will be at Ngau Ta Mei. That is within the INT zone in the Shanty Technopole and the New Territories North New Town. What is the distribution of the institutes, and will we have overseas or local universities or institutes in these areas? We will have to wait until the Education Bureau come up with the plan. In Ngau Ta Mei and New Territories North New Town, we are still conducting land use study. We will collaborate with the Education Bureau to come up with the details. Thank you. Next, Dr. Lo Wai Kok. Thank you, Chairman. The goal of the policy address is very clear: to promote happiness and improve livelihood. Since the establishment of the Hong Kong SAR government, we are not proactive enough in land creation and identification that hinders our development and construction of infrastructure. First, infrastructure-led approach, and how do we avoid impact caused to development. For this infrastructure-led approach is very clearly stated in the Northern Metropolis Action Agenda, because when a few years ago, when the Northern Metropolis Development Strategy was promulgated, there was this idea of a twin city, 3 circles. There is a quality Shenzhen interaction circle and the eco-recreation tourism circle, etc. This action agenda is more detailed. You have 4 areas, including the high-end professional services and logistics hub, blue-green recreation tourism and conservation circle, etc. You have to make sure that people live in contentment and work in peace. So for these few areas, you have determined these zones in accordance with the social economic development in the past years. I support it. This also avoids cross-district commute of people. I believe that some issues relating to job will be solved. This also enhances our collaboration with the cities in the Greater Bay Area. Second, infrastructure-led approach. I support it as well. You have 3 railways and 3 roads. You have to implement it. I've been chasing you for some railway projects that have not been implemented. I hope that there will not be any delay in the future. Third, tapping on market forces. I think that this is important as well. In terms of financing, the chief executive said that a committee will be established to come up with proposals. In the past, we have a number of successful PPP, public-private partnership projects. So for the artificial islands and the Northern Metropolis development, I hope that the government will consider the benefits brought about by the public-private partnership. Fourth, we have to avoid negative impacts brought about by development. I believe that Secretary for Development understand what I'm talking about. For resumption of brownfield sites, it will affect the land where the operators used to store their machineries and equipments. As you have MIC or prefabricated units, you need place to store them. So we should avoid impacting the operation of brownfields to cater to the developmental needs of Hong Kong. Thank you. Ms. Lin, please. I have two response on transport infrastructure. We have already included the timetable in the action agenda so that you can ask us about the progress. For Hung Shui Kiu and Shanghai, we have a railway linking it. So hopefully next year, the next phase of the study will be completed. As for Northern Link spur line connecting to Lok Ma Chau, we mentioned that hopefully in the next year, we can have a consensus with the mainland authorities. The Transport and Logistics Bureau will work with us together towards these goals. For projects and timetable mentioned in the policy address, these are the promises made by the relevant policy bureaus. As for how we can avoid negative impact caused by development, when we are updating our 10-year forecast of developable land supply, we gave you some explanation, say in 2026 to 27. Well, we promulgated the 10-year supply forecast last year as well. If you compare these two figures, you will figure that the supply of spade-ready site has changed. That's because we have adjusted our timetable for clearance of brownfield sites. We pushed back the timetable for us to have time to rehouse the brownfield operators. That is why the supply of brownfield or spade-ready sites will be different from the forecast last year. We hope to reach 3,370 hectares of land in 10 years' time, but we have made some minor adjustment between land supply in different years to meet the needs of brownfield operators and provide buffer. Thank you.
Next, Vice Chairman, Mr. Lau Kok Fan. Thank you, Chair. I can see that the Development Bureau's efforts are applaudable from what they said in the policy address. The Northern Metropolis Action Agenda has increased awareness of the public for Northern Metropolis. Many members of the public are often curious about what is going on with the Northern Metropolis. With the milestone stated in the action agenda, people will be more clear about the progress and the positioning and functioning of the Northern Metropolis. I agree the approach taken that is infrastructure-led and industry-driven. For the action agenda to be industry-oriented, we not only need the infrastructure, we also need policy support. As the action agenda has been published, I hope that the Northern Metropolis office can have a pack for industry policies whether it's local policies or mainland policies, you should have a list of them. And I can see that the personnel of the office mainly are on construction and development. We need to be industry oriented with the establishment of the coordination office. We should hire some scientific personnel, INT personnel. We can perhaps have manpower seconded from ITIB or the TLB. We can, in relation to infrastructure, if we have to take an infrastructure-led approach, you have to advance the schedule of infrastructure. The Northern Link will only be completed in 2033 or 34. It cannot lead the development if it is completed that late. I also want to talk about the financing part. With the charging of land premiums or land sale, the government should not charge high land premiums. The government should not solely rely on revenues from land sale. With this, I believe the government can undergo a transformation. They can grant land at lower land premiums to the industries because in the long term we can generate a lot more in terms of revenues or employment opportunities and so on. I think the policy bureaus will have to think about the innovative in the transformation. Now we have the in-situ land exchange. From what I heard, it applies not only to residential but also commercial and industrial premises. And if someone has 90% of interest, the government can help with them by giving them a hand. But the threshold about the area has not been specified for the in-situ land exchange arrangements. It says that 4,000 square meters, as long as it's a private residential development project, it would be possible for another scheme. So when will you be able to announce the details about this? Well, Ms. Lin, can you be brief in that? Because I know that the subcommittee for Northern Metropolis will have a meeting on the 20th of November 2023 at 10:45 in the morning to discuss in-depth measures related to the Northern Metropolis, so members can ask questions about the Northern Metropolis at the meeting of the subcommittee. So, Ms. Lin, your reply, please. Well, I'll perhaps focus on the last part of the question, that is in relation to the threshold for in-situ land exchange, how the site area. It depends on the commercial and industrial zone allocation in the new development areas. For Hung Shui Kiu in particular, we'll soon issue some practice notes for the private sector that the planned commercial zone in Hung Shui Kiu, well, in fact, the sizes will be different in each new development area, and we'll announce the threshold requirements then. Depending on the area of the site, we will do an in-situ exchange, but even if it may not be 100%, 90% would do. Thank you, Ms. Lam So Wai. Please. I can see that in the policy address, whether it's land development or in some response to emergency or extreme weather, they have measures targeting those. I want to talk about measures in response to extreme weather as well as the measures for the elderly today. Now, in response to extreme weather, my sector and I have held press conferences and have made suggestions to the Bureau to do 3 things in terms of flood prevention. One, you should try to dissipate the flow. You should also have a sponge city in Hong Kong. You talked about implementing $8 billion worth of stormwater drainage improvement works. What is the progress in that? Because we have seen an unprecedented rainstorm in last month. We can see that Wong Tai Sin, Chai Wan, and other areas have been flooded, and many rural villages in Sai Kung have been affected. So, for example, in Lai Chi Kok, we have a water collection area. Can it go back to, say, Lion Rock, and then we can have a channel there that intercepts the flow of water? Now, many villagers will try to collect water. So for some retaining walls or drainage systems, what can those in the districts do in terms of drainage in the rural areas? I also appreciate the measures suggested in relation to the age-friendly design for elderly persons. Will you explore the possibility of adoption of drone technology with other departments, for example, the railings or tools to be used by elderly persons, night lights or ramps? Will you think about those? Can you respond to that, the Secretary or your colleagues? Thank you. I first want to talk about age-friendly measures, and then I'll let Mr. Lau Chun-kit talk about flood prevention measures. Now, the buildings department has a building design manual. It has a dedicated chapter on accessible facilities, and I believe there is much room for improvement of the contents of the manual. From what we saw, both overseas and local NGOs had many suggestions. We hope to incorporate such suggestions to have more measures for designs that are friendly to elderly persons. It's not just in public housing, it's with the design of floorboards or toilets or how high the doorknobs should be. We want to put in such details as well in the building design manual. We also want to talk about how to implement such concepts. Now, the manual or the chapter itself contains only suggested measures. If we have a list of measures and we may think about making certain parts of it mandatory so as to ensure the implementation of such concepts, that is what we're exploring. Thank you. Next, Permanent Secretary. Well, thank you, Ms. Lam, for your suggestions in relation to flood prevention. We have adopted the concept of sponge city as well as blue-green construction. We have adopted the 3 measures we want to intercept the flow of water. We have also cleared out drainage channels, and we have also tried to have catchment areas to make sure the water is trapped. We have implemented 24 projects so far for the drainage system. We have 10 odd ongoing projects. We have really expedited our projects. We do see a few areas being flooded, including Wong Tai Sin and Hong Kong Island East, and some areas that are often flooded that are Tai Po and Sai Kung. In 2024 and 25, we hope to seek funding from the LegCo to carry out such projects. We want to deal with these flooding black spots as soon as possible. We have also carried out drainage improvement works in rural areas. We can see that some areas are low-lying, which is why they are often flooded. We will have catchment areas so that when there is heavy rain, water can be trapped in the catchment area. And in turn, the areas are less likely to be flooded. Next, Ms. Chen Yutming. Thank you. Well, I would like to first thank the Bureau for announcing the action agenda yesterday. I have 3 concerns. In the planning in the vicinity of the boundary control points should be consistent. I can see that some structure will be relocated to Heng Yun Wei because of the changes made to Sandy Ridge. We will want to have some comprehensive planning in relation to rural areas. We have also been talking about boundary economy. While we want to have boundary commerce zones and we want to convert Sandy Ridge for INTUs, yet we are relocating some unpleasant facilities in the area, the slaughterhouse. So how we are talking about Heng Yun Wei boundary control point being in a strategic location. We want to have some large-scale infrastructure for food technology. We can see that Shenzhen Bay Port is also in a strategic location, but people will have to travel to other areas for that. So should we relocate the slaughterhouse and related facilities to another area? Now 300 hectares of land will be provided for INT used for synergies to be created for Shenzhen. Even though the area is larger than the Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks by 17 times, but it is still significantly smaller than other tech areas in other locations. Since we already have space-ready sites in other areas in Northern Metropolis available for INT use, why don't you consider reserving such sites instead? Now on Northern Metropolis University Town, I can see that it is now in Hongshui-Q, Hachun, Taku, Ling, and I am quite concerned about the scattered distribution of the universities or institutions. So I want to ask the Secretary, why aren't you trying to put all the universities and institutions in one place? What are your reasons behind that? Thank you.
Lin, please. Thank you. First question on Shenzhen Slaughterhouse. Can we not place it in the boundary commerce and industry zone? As mentioned by Ms. Chen, we want to complement the East in, East out, West in, West out strategy. That is, the delivery of goods will come from either the East or the West. So it's either the West or the East where we put the slaughterhouse or allow transport of goods. I understand that some members of the public think that slaughterhouse is obnoxious, but we have to identify a piece of land to house the slaughterhouse. We now have a modernized kind of slaughterhouse, is not as obnoxious as people may imagine. For this boundary commerce and industry zone is of a very large scale. As for the details, we will communicate with Ms. Chen and the residents in the area. As for INT land, apart from Senting Technopole, as mentioned in the policy address, the 2 hectares in Sandwich will be for INT purposes as well. The ITIB would like to construct a data facility there. As mentioned in the action agenda promulgated yesterday, in the land parcel over the west, in Chimpa Chui, Pak Nai, Lao Fao Shan. In Lao Fao Shan, we will provide for tourism facilities and an iconic facility looking towards the INT land in Qianhai. The Hong Kong STB is conducting some study. Hopefully, we can provide some INT facilities there. As for the university town, there are 2 sets of ideas for that. Some people think that we should have a university cluster. But the university or the Education Bureau has talked to the local universities, and we don't think that we have to have a cluster of universities. If you look at the universities in the mainland and the overseas, very rarely we will see a number of universities clustered in an area. We will usually have a university in the location and with a radiation of facilities spanning from the university. Even when we're talking about university town, in overseas countries, we are talking about a single university with ancillary facilities nearby. So for in Hung Shui Kiu Ha Chun, Ngau Ta Mei, and New Territories North, Ping Che Taku Ling, we hope that we will have 3 different land lots for higher institutes. I named an example yesterday, say in Ngau Ta Mei, because it's close to Senting Technopole. We believe that the post-secondary institute that will be there will be connected to INT. So the positioning for that INT land will be very prominent, and we will work together with the Education Bureau about that. There was another member who talked about the size and of the university town and if there is room for expansion. Perhaps you can elaborate on that as well. Sure. There will be 5 hectares of university town in Hung Shui Kiu Ha Chun. For the remaining 50 odd hectares, they will be in Ngau Ta Mei and New Territories North, Ping Che Taku Ling areas. But as for how many hectares of university town will be in what areas, we will have to decide. Hopefully, in early next year, you will see the details. Thank you. Next, Mr. Chen Kok-fong. Thank you, Chairman. In terms of land supply and housing, I think that this proposal is very detailed, and I have a criticism. You are too premature in saying that you will not use green belt. Land is a scarce resource in Hong Kong. You seem to be telling the public that we have a lot of land, while in fact we have land shortage for a number of universities or industries. We hope that we can make good use of the land resources instead of saying that we have identified enough land. You say that you have 1,000 hectares of land that will be in extra. Will you be able to make full use of the land? For the 1,000 hectares that you said that you have, it could be the case that only half of the 1,000 hectares will be able to be used. We have to think about our long-term development. That's my comment. on Lemma Island. I support its development. I hope that we can have some infrastructures in Lemma Island. Despite my support, I hope that you can construct infrastructures there. Because there are a number of facilities, including hospitals and clinics in Lemma Island, as well as ferry services. We hope that by developing the Lemma Island, we can improve these facilities for eco-recreational and tourism. I understand that there was a public consultation where the government zoned their private land as conservation area. This is in conflict with the interest of the villagers. The villagers want to develop tourism in the area, but you zone their land inside the conservation area. I hope that you will listen to their views. I support the proposal on compulsory sale application. I support redevelopment of old buildings. Will there be encumbrance of the entire district, in turn hindering the development of it? Although the threshold is lowered to 50%, I hope that we can work on this area when we are scrutinizing the amendment bill. For enforcement action, I follow on a number of cases of NBIS notices. Sometimes it's very difficult to repair and maintain because a lot of old people live in those old buildings. I think that you should enhance support. The residents are willing to comply with the notices, but they don't know how to do so. Instead of focusing on enforcement, you should help them instead. Secretary, please. We're not just talking about enhancement of enforcement. We help the residents in complying with the notices as well. I will defer to the Permanent Secretary to elaborate on that. About the members' proposal on Green Belt, it's an issue of priority. It's not the case that we will never review the use of Green Belt. We have 1,000 hectares of Green Belt, where we will build high-density residential developments. For the remaining parts of the Green Belt, it requires construction of infrastructure. That is why we want to focus our resources on the lands that we have identified. As for the Lemma South area, or South Lemma area, we have green belt zones there. For conservation zone in Lantau, we can put in place ecotourism facilities of low density. And we will engage the landowners so that they don't feel that their land is being frozen by having their land rezoned as conservation area. So we will allow commercial activities in conservation area. As for the proposal on compulsory sale application threshold, we want to be focused in terms of our redevelopment because we're talking about old district redevelopment. We want to drive redevelopment by lowering the threshold. And we have this concept of designated area or district. So we will focus our efforts in these designated districts. And we have a dedicated office to help minority owners on repair and maintenance, I will defer to the Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. We try to help the owners in corporation and property owners. I talked about enforcement in my presentation, but we have some soft measures as well. The housing department or the buildings department and the urban renewal authority and the home affairs department work together. For buildings without owner incorporation, we try to help them establish rent. Even for those with owners incorporation, if they are unable to convene meetings, we will try to help them. For buildings with owners incorporation, we hope that the building maintenance and inspection can be taken forward as soon as possible. For owners and corporations to repair, they have difficulties in engaging inspectors or contractors to take forward the maintenance. They are not familiar with the engagement process. So we are working with the URA for those buildings with subsidy offered by the government. We hope to simplify their procurement procedures. There are some procedures that can be taken by the URA so that the owners incorporation will not have to identify contractor or inspectors on their own. That's how we help them. Because the secretary or permanent secretary have overrun, perhaps they will elaborate on the Lantau issue later. Ms. Doreen Kong, please. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to ask the Bureau. For the three major areas in the Northern Metropolis, you have some estimated population, but altogether, the total number of population will be 1.62 million people. In Sha Tin, we have only 600,000 people. In Kwun Tong, we have 670,000 people. Will these population in the Northern Metropolis come from other districts? For this 1.62 million people in the Northern Metropolis, is this a reserved kind of estimation or is it aggressive one? On urban renewal or redevelopment, I'm happy to hear from the government that they will enhance efficiency in this area. In July, the URA mentioned that they need $96 billion to take forward a number of projects in this year. The government has increased the ceiling of loan to $25 billion. How do you come up with this ceiling? Will it be enough for digitalization projects in the future? On compulsory sale, the secretary mentioned 7 districts. What is the boundaries of these districts? Hong Kong is such a small place. If we are to divide Hong Kong into, or if we are to designate these 7 areas, will it create some kind of unfairness? If there are some old buildings that fall on the boundary of these designated areas, how will you handle that? For a building aged between 50 and 16, there is a difference of 5%. So why is there such a minor difference? Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Lin, please. Ms. Kong's first question was on the population of the Northern Metropolis. The figure is derived from how much population and how many housing units and the commercial area in each zone. So we are talking about the capacity. We are not estimating the population intake per se. We are just estimating the capacity. We believe some people would move in to the northern Acropolis when their buildings are undergoing redevelopment. We also have projections for land. We have drawn reference from the Census and Statistics Department data, and that's how we derived our own figures. On redevelopment, the URA has increased its debt limit from $6 billion to $25 billion. The limit was proposed by the URA. When they proposed the limit, they took into account when the projects will be implemented and when they will generate revenue from such projects. Based on these projections, they proposed the limit to the government. So we have granted the increase of the limit based on what was suggested by the URA. On compulsory sale, we have designated areas with the older buildings. In these designated areas, they will have a lower threshold for compulsory sale. We based our boundaries on the outline zoning plans instead of the actual district boundaries. We have looked at the outline zoning plans and came up with the numbers of older buildings in the districts and how many of such buildings were issued with MBIS notices. That is, it means that the area has a pressing need for building inspection. As the Permanent Secretary said, we have 7 designated areas. Upon detailed analyses, we hope to introduce a bill into the LegCo this year, and by then we should have the details about them, and there should be a map. As Ms. Doreen Kong, for the buildings that are located on the boundaries of the designated areas, we will take a lax approach. If they are in that boundary, even just by a little, the lower threshold will apply. So for different building clusters, if they have different age in their buildings, will you apply the same approach? Say for an area, if it is a designated area, it is 55 years of age, it is to be 80%. And if it is in a designated area, it will be 70%. But some may be 60 years old, some may be 70 years old. They will have different application thresholds. So as we said earlier during the panel meeting, for adjoining lots, we will jointly calculate the application threshold with a weighted average approach. We will have the details when we introduce the bill. Thank you. Next, Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, Chair. Well, whether it's the measures mentioned in the policy address and the action agenda, I think there are many things to be praised. I do want to raise a point, however, in relation to land supply. I do agree with the direction and the approach taken. However, in reality, people may have different interests when it comes to resumption. You will face challenges. As the Secretary said, some adjustments may be needed. in the next 8 years, we will need to resume 700 hectares of land. Again, we may face difficulties with the resumption of such land. I all along support the reclamation of the central waters to be undergone in parallel. I hope the Development Bureau will continue to do that. I do see some long-term policy changes, including the enhanced approach taken with certain industries. There may be different arrangements for land allocation. The Secretary said earlier that practice notes would be issued soon. I think that soon is good, but often people aren't aware practice notes have been published. As these have a great impact on society, I hope that the administration will bring up the detailed arrangements in future meetings for our discussion. Now, Mr. Lau Kwok Fan talked about something related to the Northern Metropolis. I want to expand on that. Right now, we have 4 different zones in the Northern Metropolis. The government, I won't say it does not have any industry-oriented policies, but I can't see the relationship between the policies that government has and the zones. So even with you have land and infrastructure, the industry won't just pop up. You need to do something to make it happen. The government should be innovative and take the lead in that. You should use Northern Metropolis as a starting point or a trial point. On the review of buildings ordinance, I definitely support the change. I also appreciate the fact that you care about 3 new buildings. We can't resolve the issue about 3 new buildings right away. These are ongoing issues. We should review not only buildings ordinance as well as other relevant ordinances, that's I would say, to help those owners who are in desperate need of the government's support. Thank you. Ms. Lin, please. I would first like to thank the member for supporting our work in Khao Yai Chou Artificial Islands. Will soon commence the environmental impact assessment process. When we adopt the enhanced conventional new town approach in new development areas, we will issue practice notes and we will try to bring it up during regular panel meetings for members' discussion. I did record the point made by the member about even if we have land and infrastructure, the industry won't just pop up. That is indeed the case. The agenda sets out the positioning of the 4 zones, but it does not mention specifically about the policies, and we'll have the policies soon. We right now have 300 hectares of land for INT use in the Santine Technopole. But how should the land be allocated? I believe there should be detailed distribution of work as well as allocation, and whether there should be direct allocation and what do you want from that allocation. So we have the Financial Secretary and the office under it they have specific plans and studies conducted for that. And the ITIB has been undergoing consultant studies for the use of the area as well. So you'll soon see how we're going to implement industry-oriented policies on the review of buildings ordinance. We hope that in next year we will have some proposals. The Home and Youth Affairs Bureau is also working on that, because buildings repairs is one thing. We also need routine or better buildings management. We have to strengthen such management. And on buildings management, the Home and Youth Affairs Bureau will review the building management ordinance in that regard. On Cao Yichao, on the last term, I believe whenever a stage milestone is achieved in a study, the administration would make reports to the administration. So when the time is appropriate, the administration should come back to the panel to report its progress. The next one would be Mr. Louis Leung. Thank you. Chair, I would like to thank the Secretary for Development for coming here today to brief us on the measures related to the development of land. After I heard the presentation, I have 2 questions and a comment to make. Can you go back to slide 12? In relation to accelerate the land production and development streamline development procedures, as you know, we recently passed a very complex development bill. It was quite a challenge indeed, and we can see that speed is indeed enhanced. As for administrative procedures, in the CE's Q&A session, I asked last week that whether this is included in the KPIs. Well, in relation to the streamlining of procedures, there's always more to do. I do accept that. So my question for the Secretary is, without KPIs, the 3 measures to be implemented, that is extension of standard rates for charging land premium title, checking arrangement for land resumption compensation, and relaxation of gross floor area exemption to reasonably accommodate above ground car parks. Do you have a timetable for us? Thank you. And second, on slide 13, that is to expedite urban renewal. I can see that the Bureau will adopt a more target-oriented approach for lowering the compulsory sale application threshold. I can see that there are 7 OZPs, that is Changsha 1, Ma Tau Kok, Mong Kok, Sai Ying Pun, and Shan Wan Chun, Wen Wan Chai, and Yang Ma Te. I do note that outside the 7 designated areas, there are many buildings that fulfill the classification of older buildings. For example, Hong Hom, I think it was not included. Why is it not included? So that's my question. My comment is that for Annex E of the paper, you said that you will use the operation of law to designate the OZPs. I hope that there is some flexibility in that. As buildings age, there will only be more districts that will be designated as designated areas. So when you need to amend legislation to have more designated areas, it will be very complicated. So if you can put them all in a schedule and you can go through negative vetting, it will be much easier.
Secretary Lin, please. Thank you. We will continue to take forward the streamlining of administrative procedures for the 3 measures mentioned, including the standard rates for land premium and the exemption of floor area for car parks. By the end of this year, we will implement them. Upon implementation of these 3 measures, we will continue to talk to the industry. Hopefully, they can provide a new list of measures to improve. Chairman and Mr. Long are representatives of the industry. We will get in touch with you and other members of the industry. We will see what measures we will have to work on next year. On compulsory sale threshold, Mr. Long asked why Hong Kong does not fall within the 7 designated areas. We have some objective factors to come up with these designated areas, but I don't have relevant information at hand. Perhaps I go back and look at the factors. On Mr. Long's suggestion, as we are designating these areas in the law, will we have flexibility to add new designated areas by way of negative vetting? We do have such a plan, and we are planning to adopt negative vetting. So we need more convenient ways to change our designated areas. Thank you. Next, Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you, Chairman. I have 2 questions on Hung Shui Kiu development. In the Northern Metropolis Eastern Agenda, it states that Hung Shui Kiu is for high-end professional services and logistics. Earlier, the government said that for Hung Shui Kiu, there will be 500,000 job opportunities, and there will be 2 million square meters of commercial and residential floor area, and there will be 40,000 job opportunities in the retail industry. Now, the Development Bureau is positioning Hung Shui Kiu as high-end professional services and logistics hub. Will you increase the commercial and residential floor area further? Because previously you said that there will be 2 million square meters of commercial and residential floor area, and there will be job opportunities in the retail industry. When the villagers, residents there, learn about the action agenda, they want to have job opportunities within the area. So we hope that when professionals have job opportunities for grassroots people, they want to have relevant job opportunities in the retail industry as well, because there will be shopping malls there and restaurants there. So will there be any adjustment to the commercial and residential floor area upon the repositioning of Hung Shui Kiu? Thank you. My second question, if Hung Shui Kiu is to be the high-end professional services hub, the Secretary has named a number of examples, including legal and insurance services. I have a suggestion. will you engage some professional bodies, including some international professional organizations, to take root in Hongshui-Q? There is an area that I'm familiar with for high or value-added logistics industry. We have an edge. We're talking about maritime arbitration and insurance. Will you turn Hongshui-Q into a landmark to introduce maritime organizations here? If you turn Hongshui-Q into a landmark, then it will become a real high-end professional services hub. On legal industry, I understand that the locations of a number of courts are fixed. So there is a district court in Caroline Hill. Will you locate some courts in Hongshui-Q? If you have a new court in Hongshui-Q, it will help legal professionals who work in the area, that in turn drive development. Thank you. Secretary Lin, please. For the commercial floor area in Hongshui-Q, Hachun, in action agenda, we mentioned that there would be no less than 2 million square meters. Apart from this commercial floor area, because Hongshui-Q is where high-end professional services and logistics will be at, the floor area for logistics industry is not included in the 2 million square meter. There will be another 4 million square meter floor area for logistics and high-end services. Mr. Chow asked if there could be more. In the action agenda, we mentioned this point. We want to extend this hub to Laofaoshan. As I was replying to another member, I said that in Laofaoshan we will have some INT land and tourism elements. Because as we all know, Laofaoshan has some tourism elements there already, but we will reinforce it for extension of commercial floor area that will be at Chinpeichui, Laofaoshan, Park Nai, especially in Laofaoshan. The member mentioned that we have a number of possibilities. Say we have edge in legal and maritime services. In each of the area, they have their own positioning that facilitates our attraction of enterprises. So when we specify that parcel of land as a high-end professional and services logistics hub, the Oasis can work on that in a more focused manner. If members know of any enterprises that are interested to take root here, please talk to the Oasis and the Development Bureau. Thank you. Next, Mr. Edward Leung. Thank you, Chairman. I have 2 questions. Last month, there were 2 typhoons, and we have a torrential rain and a number of black rainstorm signals. In Taiwan, there was a flooding. So the conditions was very poor. In Happy Valley, we have a storage tank that collects storm water from Wan Chai and Causeway Bay. So in Island East, we don't have our own storage tank. When I had a meeting with the Development Bureau, you said that you have 6 measures to alleviate the flooding situation in Taiwan, and you mentioned that you may be constructing a storage tank or storage tunnel there. Is this plan confirmed? If yes, what is the timetable? That's my first question. I heard from members of the public that the COVID has subsided. They hope that there will not be any requirements for declaration in the future. And how will you make use of the quarantine facilities? That's not mentioned in the policy address. Some quarantine facilities are used for foot drilling, and some are used to house foreign domestic helpers. Will you demolish these quarantine facilities, and what is the timetable for that? Thank you. Secretary Lim, please. Thank you, Chairman. Perhaps I respond to the first question on stormwater storage tank. There is some technical considerations. I will invite Mr. Ricky Lau, Permanent Secretary, to take that question. As for quarantine facilities, for Tam May, that will be for the hostels for construction workers. In Santin, the quarantine centers there will be for training for imported laborers. For those in Qingyi, that will be for youth hostels. As the COVID situation sometimes fluctuates, the Deputy Financial Secretary is talking to a number of policy bureaus, including the Development Bureau, as to how we can release the land used for quarantine facilities progressively, or use those facilities for other purposes temporarily. We will release the land and facilities progressively. There is an emergency hospital that is not quarantine facility in Lok Ma Chau that is in use. I understand that there are a number of residents who go to the emergency hospitals and they receive some radiation services there, and the waiting list there is shorter. We will continue to work with the hospital authority in making good use of the facilities to help our residents in terms of treatment and consultation. I defer to Mr. Ricky Lau to talk about the flood storage pond. In the 8 billion works project, it includes flood diversion or drainage services in Island East. So we take forward the project in 2 phases. In the first phase, that is next year, we will seek funding from the Legislative Council. That is to enhance the capacity of the drainage in the area. As for the second phase, we hope to intercept flood on the hills so that the floods will not go to the low-lying area. And we are designing that. Hopefully by 2025 to 26, we can come to the Legislative Council to talk about our plan. So you will be building this flood storage pond, correct? We are looking at that, but if we are able to intercept the waters at the upstream, we will be able to handle the storm waters in the downstream. And we will look into that. This is my turn. I have 2 comments. We want to encourage aging in place, and that's the government's policy as well. The Deputy Financial Secretary will coordinate with relevant bureaus to put forward the proposals for incorporating universal design concepts and accessibility into the Buildings Department's Building Design Manual. We used to have a policy to encourage developers to provide residential care home for elderly in their own developments. In the 2022 policy address, the floor area exempted will be increased from 5,400 to 5,900 square meters. You need support from the Labor and Welfare Bureau. After such support, there will be a number of procedures to go through because the LWB does not have any experts in scrutinizing the application. As the Deputy Financial Secretary will coordinate with different bureaus to put forward this proposal. Will you be collaborating your efforts in scrutinizing the applications as well? Sometimes the facilities for elderly are not up to par. I hope that you can pay attention to that, especially when you have such experts in the Development Bureau. My second point. A lot of people support the government in streamlining the development procedures. That is very important. As I mentioned in the panel on public services meeting, there is a need for a change in mindset among frontline civil servants. I came across a case where a department is scrutinizing an OZP that has been approved. According to the guidelines, the applicant should color their changes. When I read the letter, I was dissatisfied. 2 months after the submission of the application, the department sent a letter to the applicant saying that the proponent did not color the changes. They only notify the applicant 2 months after they submit an application. This is a very simple thing. Simply by making a call, the project proponent will be made aware of the mistakes. The department could be telling the applicant about what changes they have to make just by making a call. What I want to say is that there should be a change in mindset among civil service or civil servants. I hope that you can remind relevant departments about that. When you're streamlining the development procedures, civil servants as facilitators will have responsibility. Thank you.
국장.
Secretary. Thank you, Chair, for your comments. Well, thank you for your help in the review of the building design manual. There may be gross floor areas concessions provided to private developers to have elderly facilities. You are worried that the relevant department may not be an expert in the scrutiny of applications. The Social Welfare Department actually liaises with us on the applications, but we can definitely think about whether we can just hold a meeting to fit the applications together to streamline the arrangements. We'll work with the Labor Welfare and Welfare Bureau on that. In relation to the administrative procedures, you're talking about a culture change. We will definitely attach great importance to that. We will talk to the industry next year which topics to look into. In fact, we are the one who proposed the topic. We want to issue guidelines to everyone, not only those under the Development Bureau. For all vetting departments, we will have some KPIs or will set things that they can't do when processing applications. When we often heard feedback that some comments will be given at one point and other comments will be given later. So we will set a rule that all comments have to be given at the same time. And if you are rejecting the application, the department can't just say you do not comply with the criteria. We have to specify specifically for the applicant's reference what is non-compliant, so the applicant knows what to do. So I will put what I said into written form in the form of guidelines. Well, thank you. the trade stakeholders told me that the relevant departments or the development bureau does have some proposals, as the secretary said. Apart from the measures to be implemented as mentioned here, there are other arrangements to be streamlined. I believe we can follow up on that later. Well, I can see that there are 3 other members who are going to speak for the first round, and 3 other members want to speak for the second round. Seeing this, I'll extend the meeting by not more than 15 minutes. So please observe the time limit, members. Next, Dr. Wendy Hong. Thank you. Chair, I have 3 questions in relation to the Northern Metropolis Action Agenda. It is said that we will resume 700 hectares of land in the next 5 years, but it wasn't mentioned how much will be used in the resumption in terms of cost. How much will be needed? So if there is professional assessment today, I heard it would be approximately $90 billion. From what I heard, the fund has allocated $10 billion for the $100 billion for the development. And if that is the case, this project alone will take up 90%. And how much over budget will we go? So I want to know how much the gap will be, even if you're going to go over budget. To promote the redevelopment of old districts, it is said in the policy address that the plot ratio in the Yeochim district may be transferred to Khao Yichao. I do support that because I suggested to the Development Bureau that the transfer of plot ratio arrangement should be applied there. And from what I can see, if they can do that between OZPs, it will facilitate the other projects, the more revenue generating projects, to subsidize the projects that are not as profitable. So, for example, in Kowloon City and To Kwa Wan, I think this same arrangement can be applied there. I also want to ask about brownfield operations. From a reply given by the Bureau in June, in relation to the Sectin Technopole development, 126 hectares of brownfield sites will be affected. But from the action agenda, I can see that there will be Ha-Chun will have 210,000 hectares of land, and we will also have a multi-story building for the industries. So altogether, how much floor area will be provided? Will it be enough to relocate the 126 hectares of brownfield sites? Of course, it may not be enough, but I want to know how much they can accommodate. Thank you. From our estimates from 2023-24, that is this financial year, in the next 5 years from now, we will resume 700 hectares of land for development, and most of them would be in the Northern Metropolis. So how much will be needed for compensation? Now, for land in new development areas, we'll have a Tier 1 compensation that is $1,000 odd per square foot. If it is not in a new development area, it will be half that. So it really depends on which year it is and where it is, and we'll have an exact figure. I believe the surveyors in the media reports have taken the tier 1 figure and have derived the cost you mentioned, that is $90 billion. We won't spend all of that at the same time, even if $90 billion is the cost. We will need 5 years to resume the land, so there will be a spread of cost. We believe we can deal with the cost involved. Now, the member also suggested that we should see if we can conduct a study to see how we can make use of Kaoyuqiao development to promote redevelopment in old districts, and the transfer of plot ratio arrangement should be applied there. And we will take note of your suggestion. We will consider whether the transfer of plot ratio arrangement can be applied to other districts. We do not have any concrete proposals at the moment, but I do take note of your suggestion, Dr. Hung. Now, the study incorporates many aspects. For URA projects, they often do not have enough funds because they have to make much compensation. So we are looking into whether some land in Kaoyuqiao can be given to the URA, whether as an asset or for land to be used for relocation. We believe it should promote the redevelopment of old districts. As for redevelopment projects of the private sector, we are thinking about using land to encourage private developers to develop in older districts. We will also look into these measures in the study. On brownfield sites that are affected and how much area we can provide for the relocation of the brownfield sites, we will not only look at Santin Technopole for the brownfield sites. In new territories that are affected, there are 1,000 hectares. But we have reserved sites for multi-story building for the industries, and the other facilities is approximately 70 hectares because they are high-rise developments. So the plot ratio will be approximately 6. So for 70 hectares times 6, we only have 400 odd hectares, but the brownfield sites affected, there are 1,000 hectares. So we hope that in future we can identify more industrial sites for the relocation of brownfield operators, but we believe it will not be 1-for-1 for some lower end brownfield operations. They may end their operations after receiving compensation. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Lee Chen-keung. Thank you, Chairman. I learned from the Secretary reply that for the development of Northern Metropolis, they will need support from various industries and they will have to transform. When you talk about transformation, we will see how the industries can complement with the development of Greater Bay Area. I hope that you can have a coordination mechanism. Businessmen cannot just transform or fold their business. There are a lot of industries that can coordinate with those businesses in other cities in the Greater Bay Area. Will you be matching businesses? I support the development of Northern Metropolis and Kaoyuqiao artificial islands. But in terms of design, I hope that you can consider 2 points. You have some visions, but will you complement your visions with the 8 centers that we are positioned at under the 14th five-year plan? Will you invite more headquarters of different industries to come to Hong Kong, including high-value industries, logistics, and e-commerce industries? Will you invite these businesses to come to Hong Kong? I would also like to talk about talent accommodation. If you also adopt a 7:3 ratio in the Northern Metropolis and Kao Yi Chao Artificial Islands, will the talent accommodation fall within the 7 or the 3 part of the portion or the ratio? On old buildings, a lot of people are worried about urban development. In 2011, you talk about the 70% of compulsory sale threshold, and now you are seeing that only those with pressing need will have to fulfill the 70% threshold. There were some people who are already planning to sell their old buildings, and now they may be deterred from your new proposal. I think that for dilapidated buildings that cannot be repaired any further, they will have to be redeveloped, but you need transport facilities to support that. I believe that you have relevant measures, but you have to explain to members of the public how you determine what districts have pressing need for redevelopment. I would also like to ask about unauthorized building works. There is not much mention of such in the policy address. On the issues of unauthorized building works, how will you handle that? Will you tolerate that, and will you make use of technology to handle the issue? Thank you. Secretary Lin, please. Thank you, Chairman. First question on how we attract enterprises of different industries. Now we have promulgated the Northern Metropolis Action Agenda. We have different positioning for different zones in the Northern Metropolis. That is to facilitate OASIS and different policy bureaus to introduce enterprises that are interested to their relevant zones in the Northern Metropolis. We hope that this action agenda will facilitate that. On talent accommodation, there will be talent accommodation for INT industries and other industries as well. We keep an open mind to that. The talent accommodation will be a kind of private residential developments. When we are setting out the OZP, we will allow for co-location of talent accommodations and industry. We don't want to see the zone turning into a large-scale residential development zone, but as long as that does not happen, we want to reserve flexibility for development so that enterprises will not have to make multiple applications if they want to build talent accommodation next to their offices. For compulsory sale application threshold, we have a mechanism for that. For buildings that do not fall within the designated areas and they want to redevelop their buildings, they may be disappointed. But in the process of public engagement and consultation, we heard from a lot of property owners that they are worried. That is why they hope that when the government is relaxing the threshold, the government should be more focused on certain designated areas because we have not adjusted the threshold in a number of years. If we take a too aggressive approach, it will create some discomfort among the members of the public. If the 70% threshold is to be invoked, as long as the building is of over 60 years old, the threshold will go to 70%. For buildings aged above 70, the threshold is 65%. So there is opportunities for redevelopment. As for processing of unauthorized building works, the Buildings Department has not amended the legislation. As for prevailing penalty, they adopt a risk-based approach to patrol and inspect. When there is unauthorized building works identified, they will issue removal order. For serious cases, there will be follow-up investigation. So apart from issuing removal order, when there is sufficient evidence and that the relevant parties carry out the unauthorized building works knowingly, there will be other prosecutions under the law. Upon amendment of the ordinance, we hope that we can raise the prosecution or lower the prosecution threshold so that we don't have to accumulate a lot of evidence before we can make or initiate any prosecution. Thank you. Next, Mr. Tan Ka-piu. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to ask about Kowloon East. There was flooding in Wong Tai Sin. The basement of the shopping mall involved has been reopened, and the chief executive said that $8 billion will be injected to improve the drainage services in Hong Kong. The Wong Tai Sin issue is so prominent, and there is wide media reports on that. Will the Wong Tai Sin issue be covered by the $8 billion drainage improvement projects in the policy address? Second, the Northern Metropolis initiative is so grand. There are 4 areas, and you have Akawicha artificial islands. But what about Kowloon East? It is a CBD. I've been chasing the secretary for an answer. Under this EKEO, there are only 2 infrastructural projects that is unrelated to industry. For the phase 4 and 5 of the redevelopment of Yumen Square, the tendering failed. The vacancy of grade A offices in Kowloon East is over 20%. Can we showcase the policy direction and economic development of the Kowloon East under this EKEO initiative? You need to gauge the situation and tell the enterprises and the industry that the Kowloon East CBD is a good place. If that's the case for Kowloon East, I can't imagine what is going to happen to the 3rd CBD. And how will you make use of the Kowloon East waterfront area to create value? There are some organizations that hope to create an international marina club there. Thank you. Secretary Lin, please. I will invite the Permanent Secretary to talk about the Wong Tai Sin Drainage Improvement Project. As for Kowloon East, we have an EKEO there, and the work started very early. So for revitalization of industrial building and consolidation of street areas and beautification of waterfront areas, some of these work have already been completed. I believe that members are able to see the changes in the Kowloon East. That is why we have not focused on this area in the policy address. And instead, we focus on the infrastructure in Kowloon East. As I've mentioned, there are a number of projects in the Kowloon East that have already been implemented. In terms of revitalization of industrial building, as we mentioned, that we will regularize the standard rate for land premium for redevelopment of industrial building. Hopefully that will facilitate the use of industrial building. As for waterfront, there will be a number of projects that will be completed very soon. I would like to take this opportunity to share with you what facilities that we will include in the waterfront area of Kowloon East. We will continue to listen to your views in this area. Perhaps I invite Mr. Lau, Permanent Secretary, to talk about the Wong Tai Sin situation. Thank you. There was a black rainstorm signal that affected a number of areas, including Wong Tai Sin. As mentioned, we have 7 stormwater drainage improvement projects with a total cost of more than $8 billion, including projects in Wong Tai Sin. Apart from adding some drainage pipelines, we have a storage tank or storage pond in a park in Wong Tai Sin. As I mentioned, in the next year, we will seek funding from the Legislative Council to take forward this project. I already extended the meeting by 15 minutes just now. There is less than 3 minutes left. There are 3 members who would like to speak for the second round. If we are to allow them to speak for the second round, I will have to extend the meeting by another 10 minutes. Any objection? If there is none, for the 3 members who would like to speak for the second round, they will have 2 minutes. After the 3 members have put their questions, I will invite the Secretary to make a consolidated reply. First, Ms. Chen Yutming. Thank you, Chairman. Secretary, I would like to follow up on the co-development for landowners in Northern Metropolis. There are a lot of landowners and Chiltern that will want to participate in the development. The policy address allows landowners with 90% of the ownership to participate in the development. I hope that the Bureau and the Home Affairs Department can provide an information kit for Chiltern and villagers to know how they can consolidate efforts to participate in the development. The Chief Secretary will be leading the Commission on the financing of major development projects, and an office will be established. I would like to know when the financing proposal will be out, and will you conduct public consultation exercise? Thank you.
Next, Mr. Chang Hop-fung. Thank you, Chair. It is said in the policy address that the Khao Yi Chau, there will be a study for the transfer of plot ratio for Khao Yi Chau to promote urban redevelopment, and I support that because I think we have to be innovative. The last study was performed many years ago, and I think the arrangements were not very popular anyway. So we have to be innovative to expedite the redevelopment of these older districts. And in turn, we can better use the Khao Yi Chau artificial islands to promote urban renewal. Next, Ms. Doreen Kong. Thank you. I want to ask about extension of leases. A bill will be introduced in 2023 this year to streamline the extension of land leases expiring in 2025. I want to ask if those expiring in 2047 will be included. Now, within aging population, will you make the building design elements for elderly persons to be mandatory? And will you refer to the other departments' guidelines on the building design? Well, I'll first answer the last question by Ms. Doreen Kong. In relation to the streamlining of procedures for the extending of land leases, in fact, for any leases ending after 2025, that will apply. So that will apply to leases expiring in 2047. We will take note of members' comments. Approximately 3 years before the renewal, we will gazette a notice, and some members are concerned that the notification period may be too short. That's why we are consulting our legal team on that. Of course, we can't have a period that is too long, but the framework will be applied to leases expiring in 2047, and a notice will be gazetted some years before that. In relation to the building design for the elderly persons, we will look at which measures to be implemented and which of these measures to be made mandatory. We hope to have some proposals in the next year. As for Mr. Chan Hop Feng, they asked whether we can include the strategy for the transfer of plot ratio in the study for Kaoyuqiao artificial islands. Well, I think the direction that we're taking is quite correct. But as we said earlier, whether a one-for-one property exchange arrangement is still useful, we do have doubts about it, so we'll look into that as well. Ms. Chen Yu mentioned earlier that we should work with the HAZ. Well, of course, we have thresholds for land exchange, but there are also thresholds for the transactions of Choutong among villagers, and the Bureau, the Home and Youth Affairs Bureau, is conducting consultations for that. I believe they will publish their findings in due course. As for the financing arrangement, the committee is just about to commence its work, so I can't really speak on behalf of the financial secretary what the direction of the committee is and what the milestones are going to be. But I believe when their work commences, they will report to LegCo on those. Well, thank you. I think our discussion relating to the policy address today has ended. I would like to thank the Development Bureau and the other departments' representatives for coming here today, and I would like to thank members for asking constructive questions. And the second agenda item is any other business. If there is no other business, this is the end of the meeting. Thank you.